Hola, welcome to the third video associated with Lesson 2 in my series on asking and answering questions in Spanish. In other words, this is part 2C. If you haven't watched parts 2A and 2B, I'd encourage you to do that before watching this video, okay? Alright, in part 2B, I was focusing on questions whose primary function or emphasis was to ask people about activities they may do. In this final lesson, in part 2 or in lesson 2, I'll highlight a few other question function types I consider to be very common in oral proficiency exams as well as in simple everyday conversations. Okay, so the emphasis won't be so much on asking about activities as other types of topics. So what this slide shows are some of those other common question function or emphasis types and some elements to listen for, to look for, so you know what the questioner is asking. We can be dealing with questions whose function is a description, right? We're going to hear como in a form of the verb ser. Or the question might be about possession or quantity, right? Or likes or dislikes. We're going to hear gustar. Preferences, what do I prefer one thing or another, or what do I prefer? Obviously, I'll hear the verb preferir. Might be about your favorite things. You know, people that do oral interviews tend to ask at least one or two questions. You know, what is your favorite this? What is your favorite that? Or it might be a question that goes to the person's plans or obligations. You're going to hear ir plus a plus verb, or tener que plus verb, etc. So let's look at each of these functions, right, and some examples of questions and answers you might encounter. First of all, description questions. You're going to hear the interrogative pronoun como plus a form of the verb ser. For example, es, son, era, fue, fueron, eran, etc., plus a noun. So if somebody says como es, como era, como son, I know they want a description. ¿Cómo es tu casa? Mi casa es grande, tiene 3 dormitorios, 2 baños, una cocina grande, etc. They might ask about a person, in which case they want a description of the person's personality, their physical characteristics, a combination of both. ¿Cómo es tu padre? Mi padre es muy simpático, es alto y tiene pelo castaño. And I could go on, right? Or, ¿cómo son tus clases? ¿Cómo son tus clases este semestre? Mis clases este semestre son muy interesantes, pero bastante difíciles. So I'm going to proceed to give a description. Moving on to the next function type. Questions about possession or quantity. Here I'm obviously going to hear the verb tener plus a noun. Do you have this? Do you have that? Or I might hear, how much of this do you have? Cuánto, cuánta, cuántos, cuántas of a certain noun do you have? So some examples. ¿Tienes la nueva novela de Stephen King? ¿Tienes la nueva novela de Stephen King? No, no la tengo. La voy a comprar mañana. I don't have it. I'm going to buy it tomorrow. How many brothers and sisters do you have? ¿Cuántos hermanos tienes? Tengo 4, 2 hermanos y 2 hermanas, right? Another question with cuánto. ¿Cuántas galletas comieron? How many cookies did you all eat? ¿Cuántas galletas comieron ustedes? Solo comimos 6. So questions dealing with possession and quantity. Also very common are questions regarding the person's likes or dislikes. Here we're going to have an indirect object pronoun, that'd be me, te, los, os, les, etc., plus a form of the verb gustar, which is going to agree with the subject, not with the indirect object pronoun, and then either a verb or a noun, singular, plural. Examples. ¿Te gusta el helado? Do you like ice cream? Sí, me gusta mucho. Remember, I have a separate lesson on the use of the verb gustar. Sí, me gusta mucho. ¿A ellos les gusta pescar? ¿Les gusta pescar? No, no les gusta mucho pescar. No les gusta mucho pescar. In essence, this is a verb first question. ¿Les gusta pescar? No. Yes or no? No les gusta pescar. ¿A ustedes les gustan las películas de suspenso? Sí, a nosotros nos encantan. Nos encantan. So, encantar works much like the verb gustar in these types of constructions. So if you hear a me, a te, a le, a les, right, and then a form of the verb gustar, the question is about your likes or dislikes. Moving on. Preference questions. One of 2 forms, or maybe more, but at least these. Que plus a noun plus a form of the verb preferir, right? And then finally, or as a second alternative, ¿Cuál prefieres? ¿Cuál plus preferir? Okay. For example, ¿qué hotel prefieres en Santiago? Prefiero el Plaza San Francisco. ¿Qué tipo de música prefieres escuchar? Here we have preferir plus a verb. ¿Qué tipo de música prefieres escuchar? Two verb combination. Prefiero escuchar música clásica. Not really. Or if there's a choice, right? ¿Cuál prefieres? Tinto, blanco o rosado? Speaking of wines. Prefiero tinto, one of the alternatives. Preference questions. Occasionally someone might ask you straight up, what is your favorite something, right? Using the formula cuál or cuáles, then a form of the verb ser, most often in the present tense, possessive adjective tú or tus, and then the noun, and then the modifier adjective favorito, favorita, or the plural forms. Examples. ¿Cuál es tu profesor favorito? Mi profe favorito es el señor Cifuentes, for example. ¿Cuál es tu película favorita? Mi película favorita es El Padrino. Or, ¿cuáles, in the plural, cuáles son tus clases favoritas? Mis clases favoritas son las de historia y de antropología. Okay, those are just examples of the formula and how to respond. And then finally, we did see this in the previous section, but questions regarding plans, obligations, a little bit about the future, using the forms ir plus a plus the verb to say what somebody's going to do or ask what somebody's going to do, pensar plus a verb, what somebody plans or intends to do, or tener que plus a verb, to say what somebody has to or what people have to do. Some examples. ¿Qué vas a hacer este fin de semana? ¿Qué vas a hacer este fin de semana? Voy a hacer algunos trabajitos en casa. I'm going to do some chores around the house. Voy a hacer algunos trabajitos en casa. ¿Qué piensas hacer durante las vacaciones? Pienso viajar y trabajar un poco. Or, voy a viajar un poco. ¿Qué tienes que hacer después de la clase? Tengo que juntarme, I have to get together. Tengo que juntarme con mi grupo de estudios. I have to get together with my study group. Okay, that concludes the third part in this second lesson in my series on asking and answering questions in Spanish. I hope you found it to be informative and useful. Remember that you can find more Professor Jason content here or on my website over at professorjason.com. You can also join my Facebook community or follow me on Twitter. I'll put that information up on the screen in just a minute. In the rest of the lessons in this series, I'll be providing lots of examples of the various question types and of all the principles relating to asking and answering questions that we discussed here in Part 1 and in Parts 2, A, B, and C. So you know what to expect. I'll leave you with a slide that displays the rest of the contents I plan to upload as part of this series. Obviously, Part 3 is next, but if you'd like to jump around, just search by title and you should be able eventually to find the topic you're interested in. Thanks again for watching. This has been Professor Jason, your guide to Spanish. See you at the next lesson. Hasta pronto. Ciao.